Happy Juneteenth, everyone. Thank you for joining us today for our presentation of Letter from a Birmingham Jail, if Martin Luther King Jr. were here today. And I send my first shout out, of course, to Just Buffalo Literary Center and the Civil Rights Program, who was our partner in this, and to the Niagara Falls Underground Railroad Heritage Center for their support as well. You know, we're in these interesting times, and it's very exciting that we've gotten now our holiday of Juneteenth honored as a national holiday. And we're still in the middle of major civil rights actions on behalf of our entire community, race of people, and beyond. So I'd like to talk a little bit about that, and I have two important guests here with me today. Um, Both of them from Buffalo, one transplanted out to Arizona State College, where he's a lecturer. That's Dr. Ntare Gault. And beside me, Brandon Williamson, who was the Dr. King of 2021 and the Black Lives Matter movement. And we can hear from them how they felt about Dr. King's letter as we know it, because what you heard today was an actual interpretation of Dr. King's letter in an enactment in a dramatic form. And to also put some things on the table about the civil rights movement and how important it is for Juneteenth. I think I'm going to say a little bit about Ntare because I've known him for some time, and then I'll ask Brandon to talk a little bit about himself. Ntare is a native of Buffalo, and his undergraduate degrees are from Ntare College, and his graduate degrees are from SUNY, including his PhD. Many of us know him as the founder of the Njozi Ensemble, which is included the Njozi Poets and Njozi Chorus, and the magazine of the same name, as well as the Slam series. These are competitions I think all of us remember that were happening around the region, including Canada and across the country. He himself is also a slam poet, an actor, and a playwright, and he's written a book, maybe more, and he'll talk more about that. I got a whole page of stuff about how good Ntare is with his craft and his dedication. So I'm glad to have him here as a lecturer from Arizona State to share with us some of his research and findings about the civil rights movement here in America. And I'm very proud to have with me here today Brandon Williamson, who many of you know through Pure Ink Poetry and his monthly programs, but as well as his stage appearances with Ujima and a number of other theatrical organizations here. So, you want to add something, Brandon?
Well, I mean, I guess I could add that Ntare is actually my first introduction into the spoken word world. So he was the one who trained me. He's the one that brought me into the world, showed me the ropes, and kind of got me started in this world. And so, starting with Njozi and then kind of branching out and going on from there. So I will always be able to say thank you for what you've done for me, Ntare, and the guidance and the leadership that you've shown me throughout the early parts of my career and, of course, going forward. So thank you, and I'm happy to be here.
Yeah, and I got to add, they're both of these college dudes now because Brandon is also teaching creative writing as an adjunct over at Fredonia. So you both got these academia things going on. So I think that's really cool. So I know, Ntare, we've been talking, and there were some things that we noted about the civil rights movement and some things that we wanted to sort of put on the table as things that people should know and understand. Can you share with us what some of your findings were, and your thoughts are on that?
Thank you. Thank you. Well, first, hey, Brandon, hey, Celeste. I've known physical class. I think we first met back in about '94.
Yes.
Uh, and for a picnic night at Community Canvas's park. And I first met Brandon at Ujima Theater. We were both doing a play there, and we got on to work together and slam things together and things like that. So, hello, thanks for inviting me. oftentimes we don't put the civil rights movement into context. Uh, we just think of it as Rosa Parks refused to give her first seat on the bus, and then boom, this whole movement started and blew up. But you know, it was a lot more organized than that. And I mean, first we have to go back to uh, you know 1865, 1856, when the Black Codes and Jim Crow started going into effect after the Civil War. And uh, and then in 1896, ironically, the year that my grandmother was born, in 1896, was Plessy versus Ferguson that legalized, that federalized Jim Crow and black codes. And so you go from that point to about 1909, the NAACP is founded, and then they were trying to do everything through the court and there was not as much direct action like protest because we were trying to do it through the court system, and even Montgomery, when there was a direct action, they outlawed boycotts in the 19 teens, and so 1948. This was the first thing was in 1948 when St. Louis deemed housing, segregated housing to be illegal. That set it up for 1954, Brown versus Board of Education. Now that outlawed Jim Crow. So when Rosa Parks, like refused to get up on the give up her seat on the bus, that was legal. Everything that King was doing in the FELC, all of that was legal. They were the ones who were following the law, and it was the municipalities all throughout the South that was breaking the law. And so then this leads us up to letter from a Birmingham jail. And also we have to remember about this. 1953 was such a pivotal year, but this was before I had a June speech. This was before uh, uh, Malcolm X is suspended from the before JFK has been assassinated, before Malcolm X has been suspended from the Nation of Islam. So since this preceding all of that, and King's response, uh, the clergy has sent a one-page letter to him. He responded with a 12-page single-space letter. Like, no. So, as he said, he had time and he was uncomfortable. And you know that they didn't respond to him only until 2011 did anybody dare to even try to respond to a letter from a Birmingham jail. So that's kind of putting it into a time frame of what was going on. And it was because the response was from a conference, a Christian ministers conference that came to Birmingham. They realized we never responded. So that's putting it into context.
Can you imagine how they would have responded at that time? My bad. Like, what are you gonna say after? Like, what are you gonna send another 12? No, yeah.
And I think what's remarkable about that is that movement up until you mentioned the date of 1948, where heretofore what the governments were doing were the ones out of line and even of the rulings, and the resistors actually following the law. And to have them condemned for doing the right thing is just part of that statement that Dr. King made in his letter, a tragic misconception. So I'm gonna ask you, Ntare, and then I'm gonna ask Brandon. Um, when you hear the two actors delivering the same commentary written by the same man, and thinking about it in terms of 1963 and now 2020, 21, 2019, back to the founding of Black Lives Matter. How do you think that plays out, really, in your thinking in terms of the movement and where we might be?
Well, the conditions, uh, 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 the conditions, unfortunately, the letter aged well. The letter is not outdated. I mean, you would figure after almost 60 years, this thing will be outdated. But if you look at the conditions, as he talked about, um, black people were still automatically looked at guilty then. And I go back to 2016, which for me was a watershed moment because how my birthday was framed that year. I woke up the morning of July 6th to see um, Alton Sterling coming to my newsfeed. And the killing of Alton Sterling that night or the night before. And I was I was a new father. I just had my baby, and I'm trying to figure out, okay, I got like I owe it to my family to like celebrate with them a little bit. But then later that day, I see Flatter Castillo, the news, the live feed from his fiance, and I was like, what? Did somebody just send the same video? No, these are different people. And this is my birthday. I'm trying to figure out like what is going on. And then what we heard from so many people was wait until all the video come out. That will tell the true story. Just wait until the video come out, and you'll understand what happened. Well, Alton Sterling, we heard the police say that he was grabbing one of their guns, and then a picture came out where the officer had his knee on his hand when he took out the gun and shot him in the chest. So the additional footage only proved that Alton Sterling was not guilty.
Yeah.
And then Flatter Castillo, they held the video, they held the officer's desk dash cam until after the entire uh, trial, and officer was acquitted to show us. No, and it happened exactly what his girlfriend or his fiance had. They put out the gun and started shooting. He shot so fast that he started with his partner. His partner didn't even see it coming. And so you can put that situation in 1963. You can put King marching in Baton Rouge, Louisiana, or in Minneapolis, Minnesota, to say these are the same situations, and he can say these words, and they will still come up the
Yeah.
Yeah, the biggest fear that I've always had frustration wise. So growing up in school, we actually didn't cover this letter. So in this production, this was the first time of me actually reading Dr. King's letter, and like not even thinking about the context. I know Celeste, when you brought me into the project, she said, a lot of the things that pertain in this letter are still relevant and still active today, and that is already a huge concern. As we often talk about in the world of poetry, you do poems on police brutality and change and so on and so forth, and your hope is that by the next time you perform this poem, it's no longer relevant. By the hope of the next time you hit a stage, you can't do this poem anymore because it doesn't apply. But to imagine writing something like this 60 years ago and still having so much of it still apply so directly, even down to the voter, voter
Registration.
registration interference and so on and so forth, which was literally on the news, legitimately like a couple months ago.
couple of days ago.
And a couple of days ago, and still going on. So to be talking about it then and seeing how there are still people who are on the defending side who claim, oh, we need to follow Martin Luther King, and then deliberately stand on the opposite side that he was on in this exact kind of situation. The Philando Castile one was especially jarring to me only because of it. We saw it from the perspective of the fiance, and it inspired a poem that I wrote called "Remember Your Training," because even in the midst of such trauma, in the midst of such terrible experience of watching her fiance get shot right there in front of her, she still had to remember her training, saying "Yes, sir," "No, sir," "Please," and everything like that in the midst of this thing going on, and that shook me. And it's something. So yeah, the fact that I in reading this, and especially reading from my perspective, which Celeste broke out to the ones that really connected to today, it's unnerving to see how much of it still applies and how well it doesn't apply in an abstract sense. It's a very direct application to what we're dealing. It's not like, oh, that's a stretch. No, this is literally happening right now.
Yeah. And I think one of the things that really prompted me in thinking about this is that I saw someone sent me, I don't even know who it was, I can't remember, it was some time ago, a black and white photograph of African American citizens holding up signs saying, "Police, stop killing us." And it was dated 1955. 1955. So we going back even further, and I know that the discussion about police brutality, some are very adamant that we need to support the police force. Others are, defund the police, let's reform. And I have to be honest, I'm sort of in this position where I call them, they're necessary dangers, because police are absolutely necessary, and in my mind, they're absolutely dangerous. And it could be just a handful of apples spoiling a whole bushel, but that handful is like a grenade going off, in large communities. So I think, when I see that and thinking about all the different things that have happened that have just happened over the last 20 years or so, when I think about the letter from Birmingham Jail, I think about, I have young men in my family, one who is 10, just turned 11, another one in his 20s. Why do we have to worry about them going to a corner store and maybe not coming back? These are the discussions that people do not want to have. And when you pointed out about, Ntare, about the dash cam images or the rest of that coming out post trial and post, I don't want to say exonerated, but let's just say getting away with murder. This is where it becomes unruly as a social construct. About nobody really wants to sort of face the truth of what it is, and we have this movement now, people trying to, certain groups of people, let me say this, trying to whitewash our history in the development of this country. So we need to do things, in my opinion, that continue to remind people of the reality of the nation. And this is one of the things that I think Dr. King's letter does. So, Brandon, I ask you, in playing Dr. King in 2021, psychologically, how did you feel? Or did it have any impact on your thinking at all about how things are?
So in reading the letter and playing the character that is your your current day Black Lives Matter kind of activist, and also watching news articles and seeing the points that people are making throughout all the protests, and then watching how other groups will take and misrepresent your message and misrepresent what you're trying to do, and what you're trying to say and what your purpose is. It definitely has an effect on you. And as I was trying to find this character, I was telling Celeste as I was watching it today, I hadn't realized that I looked so angry most of the time. But I was frustrated, and I was frustrated on one end because you are dealing with, you're dealing with it on, you're dealing with it on the side of you're trying to survive on one end, but also on the other side you're trying to deal with these people who are trying to tell you that these things are not happening, that your fears and your concerns are not valid, and when you're I'm in a group on social media because it is the area that I live in, and there's consistent like posts on, we need to support the police, we need to support the police, we need to support the police, and the question I always ask them is the same question I would ask anybody here, which is, of course, you all say, oh, it's just a few bad apples. How can we know the difference between whether we're dealing with a good apple or a bad apple? And then following up with that, when you do have a bad apple, who if the police are looking out for police, the blue protects the blue backs the blue, who backs us? Who looks out for us? Who speaks for us? And that's what we're trying to speak out for ourselves, in a sense. And we're trying to point these things out, and you all are still backing the blue. And so it's a problem it's an internal problem. It's an HR problem that they have, and it needs to be solved. Because I would tell you this, and this is something they always say: first time you're in trouble, who are you going to call? It's not going to be the police. The first person I'm not going to call is the police, especially not in Cheektowaga, because then I immediately become the threat. And so, it's a reality that and I like that you highlighted that you were saying you had young people. You thought about, you're concerned about them going to the store, but we shouldn't be at the point where it has to be someone directly connected to us in order for us to be concerned about it. It should not be someone directly connected to us for us to care about it. And I already know it right now as I'm watching. People who are watching this, we're probably preaching to the choir right now. But the words, it still needs to be said. I'm telling you.
Sure, no, that's 2021 on a roll, right? And you're out here in Ntare, where you are. How are you feeling about it, and how are you connecting sort of personally to the message of Dr. King's letter from a Birmingham jail?
I live in the middle of Trumpville. So, uh, you know, so in Arizona, where I live right on the border of Tucson. So I deal with, the Arizona City Troopers, the the town police, and also the Tucson City Police. So, like, I'm always being tailed. Um, I did get stopped a couple of weeks ago for following two cars. I'm like, really, seriously? And I, Erica and Hazel are sometimes my saving grace.
Mm-hmm.
Because if they're in the car with me, my reaction is a lot different. They're not in the car with me. Um, I will admit that they're my saving grace. Um, and I never tried. I think I told you this before in another meeting that we were in, Sister Celeste, that I'm still going to be in my Black Lives Matter, my Juneteenth, my something T-shirt. Um, so um, they're going to see me a mile away. Like, and then they ask, "Oh, you teach at the University of Arizona? Yeah, what do you teach? Africana Studies." Whoa, that's another reaction. But I still find the most racism I deal with is in the Western New York media.
Mm-hmm.
Like when I go to the comment section, whoa, man. I mean, I think today I just saw the Buffalo Bills said Happy Juneteenth. In the comment sections, because they said Happy Juneteenth. The Buffalo News said Happy Juneteenth, and people said in the comment section, "Why are you being racist and divisive? Why are you showing like? Why are you just keep on trying to tell us to hate each other?" Wow, like so just saying Happy Juneteenth triggers all these emotions.
Mm-hmm.
I know I've been told like with a name like Ntare Ali, um, obviously you have not been born in this country. Are you even a citizen yet? Yeah. I told someone else like, you know how much of a citizen I am. I had an ancestor fight in the War of 1812,
Okay.
Hmm.
and guess what? When the war was over, he was put right back on the plantation.
Yeah.
I had another ancestor, my third great grandfather, found out that he fought in the Civil War and was forced to fight on the Confederate side.
Mm.
He had to serve on the Confederate side, and on it, I went to his tombstone and found his grave mark, and he had the Confederate insignia, and he was in the Confederate force for Mississippi. And but the difference is he got paid a pension, unlike the rest of the Confederate soldiers, because he had to fight for his he had to fight against his own interests. So the black soldiers who had to serve in the Confederacy got paid a pension.
Mm.
Hmm.
But yeah, so these are like all the things that's going on in Portland, and you don't know how to deal sometimes.
Yeah.
You know, I know one thing: when I get stopped, and when Brandon can attest, they're not going to see an educated black man. They're not going to say, "Oh, I'm talking to him. He must be a doctor." I gotta know that would be their reaction.
Yes.
The
Yes.
So you know you don't get you back you something.
Buffalo Bills thing is actually what triggered my Facebook post today, because I kind of went off on Facebook, and then I said I'm logging off of Facebook because I will not do this with you on Juneteenth, because it doesn't make sense. The backlash on the idea of Juneteenth, especially when you're dealing with people saying, "Oh, but you weren't a slave." Yeah, and you weren't there when Jesus was born. You weren't there. You're not going around, flying around, giving gifts to kids. So why are you celebrating Christmas? What sense does it make? Like, I'm not gonna revamp that, but like, get out of here. And it's just people trying to find a reason to disown or to like just find a reason to just attack something that we can use to celebrate us. Like I didn't see you in Hamilton. You weren't doing the background dances for the world turns upside down. I didn't see you holding the chair over your head. I didn't see you signing the Declaration of Independence. So why are you celebrating July 4th? Like, don't come to me and like you have to understand the concept of a holiday. Not to dive into this whole thing, but like seriously, there's a disconnect, and I think it's deliberate. It's a deliberate attack. It's a deliberate disconnect that has infiltrated even a lot of our people who may not have even affected or celebrated Juneteenth before, and I didn't have it in me to do today. Maybe Monday when Juneteenth weekend is over, but I'm not gonna let it steal my joy now that I can enjoy this weekend and do what I usually do on Juneteenth, which is watch TV.
But I told someone a specific. Okay. I told someone a specific story. I was like, okay, somebody said, I heard a congressman say, no one whose grandparents were even slaves are alive now. Well, that's a lie because my father, his grandmother and grandfather were enslaved and free after the Civil War. And, we have our own story in the family about when, um, she found out that she was free and she went and got one of the chickens and cooked it and ate it. And he went to beat her and she said, hey, you can't beat me now because, like I'm free. And he was, her slave master was like, what, huh? Like, what are you talking about? But she was freed when Grant's army, Sherman's army came through
Mm-hmm.
South Carolina and it started freeing plantations. So it's not true that no one's not even the grandchildren are living. Even my father is living.
Mm-hmm.
And he's 88, and even one of their heroes, grandparents were slaves. um, Paris Thomas. Grandparents were slaves. That's one of their heroes.
Mm-hmm.
So that's where that lie out also.
Yes, yes. I think so. The lies out, and I think one of the things that is the holdover among things is there is uh, the history of our police force, of our law enforcement, that they originated for the sole purpose of recovering and returning and capturing runaway slaves. And then as time went on, uh, the mercenaries, for bounty hunters, for lack of a better word, evolved into an organization. But I think that that mentality still, founding premise lingers on as part of just an attitude and an outlook of misplaced authority. The United States record, of how we addressed civil rights, supposedly as the largest democracy, free country in the world, just demonstrates just how poorly we're willing to acknowledge our history, just how poorly we're willing to accept equality as part of a national agenda. And the founding fathers, God bless them for writing the Constitution, which they took from the indigenous peoples of North America, by the way. The Seneca Nation, our Constitution is built on those principles. It's not even theirs. But so many of them were slaveholders. And I recently heard the story of how George Washington, our first president, when in Philadelphia, because Philadelphia had a rule, and I think it bears research, but I read about this, that if you were a slave and you lived in Philadelphia for 6 consecutive months, at the end of that period, you could be declared free. And of course, George Washington had his band of slaves with him, however many he wanted to bring with him. And when we got to like 5 months and 28 days, he would return his slaves back to Mount Vernon and bring in a new group just to avoid their own freedom. And we celebrate President's Day, right? But we know our early presidents were slaveholders. So I think that there's just a natural psychological thing that happens with some populations that said this is a group of people who cannot be our equal for a lot of different reasons, and all of them fallacies, of course, and we cannot acknowledge their contributions. The Kush Kingdom and Egypt and all the rest of that stuff, that's just, as far as they're concerned, I put them in the same category as the world as flat people, because they have that misunderstanding. So I think, and now they're fighting against the word woke. I mean, I could go on and on about the things, and too, and Brandon knows too, things that they're trying to squash now, and why artists like yourself, artists like Brandon, artists like here we're at Express Entertainment Studios, we're trying to do work that's meaningful, that sheds light on a global truth, as opposed to something contrived, as mentioned in Dr. King's letter from a Birmingham jail. And I think I would like people to really know and understand that Dr. King was a philosopher as well as a student of divinity. I mean, just rehearsing and reading his words was difficult because, right? Because he had a way of crafting things and putting things in there. His references, biblical references, as well as humanities references, as well as historical references. He was a scholar. He was a thoughtful person. He was an advocate. And I don't necessarily know that he would have been a minister, except for the fact that he came from a family of ministers, because he had such a broad scope of interest in other things. So I had someone say, in reference to holiday, well, Dr. King got a holiday. I'm like, okay, we just can't go there. We just cannot go there.
They also killed him.
Thank you.
You want to take it that route? That
right.
doesn't redeem it either. Like, what?
So, yeah. So it's time, and the battle continues, and I would likely at the pace that we're going, 20 or 30 more years, and I'm not trying to be a pessimist, but there will be some elements and some aspects of Dr. King's letter in 20 or 30 years that will still be the same. I think our population is becoming more mixed. Like you see on TV, the diversity of the United States is changing. We have more Asian people being represented, and I'm sorry for them being blamed for the coronavirus. We have more biracial children being born out of relationships. So you have television programs like Blackish and Almost Black, and mixed marriages and mixed relationships. So I think that there's a tier in our society that is really understanding that we are people who have the same desires. A woman in somewhere Manchuria wants the same thing for her children as some woman in the Swiss Alps, right? I mean, some things are just, bottom line issues. So that's kind of how I feel about, Dr. King as a messenger and what the letter of Birmingham Jail says to us. I don't know where we are time-wise, because these are gentlemen that we could talk for a long time. But go ahead. I was going to ask Ntare, do you have some sort of closing thoughts on the events of today, or the message from King, or any other thing that is sort of relevant to the importance of celebrating Juneteenth and appreciation and putting the record straight on the civil rights movement?
I thought that what something very poignant that Dr. King said that reflects what's going on, how the protests have become more and more rebellious. I mean, that's not the outside provocateurs, joining in and being opportunists. And I think even some of some paid people to join the riots and just start destroying things. But when he said freedom is never voluntary, necessarily given by the oppressor, it must be demanded by the oppressed. And then he also stated, oppressed people can't stay oppressed forever. It's almost as if there's an attitude that this can go on indefinitely. And how can it? Eventually somebody's going to come up and say, I mean, we saw the situation happen some years ago in Dallas, where the officers were shot, and then everybody immediately said that was because of Black Lives Matter. No, the man who did the shooting had nothing to do with Black Lives Matter.
Yep.
He was completely independent, but but he describes King's quote here. And then one other thing that King said in the speech was in the letter was when he was talking about they kept on saying outside people. I still hear outside people are joining in and things like that. America has a lot of nerve to talk about outside people when we go to every nation and we have been in World War II. We had gone to Korea. We went to Vietnam. We've gone to Iraq. We've gone to Afghanistan. We've gone all over, at least the entire world. We've gone to Kuwait, and we've been in El Salvador. And then we say we don't want outside agitators. We've been outside agitating since 1917.
Yes.
And also, this is strangely irrational notion that there's something within the very flow of time that will inevitably cure all ills.
Yes.
In reality, time is neutral. It can be used constructively or destructively, and I've come to feel that people of ill will have used time much more effectively than those of goodwill. Direct quote. But the same, I think that same thing applies. People say, oh, it's going to happen. Or, if you just wait, time heals all ills and so on and so forth. That's not how time works. You need to work at it you need to work at it over time in order for something to get done. I've learned this in owning a house now because I am notoriously lazy when it comes to housework. I found when you own a house that, for example, if you need a gutter fixed, it's not going to get fixed if you just wait.
Right.
If you don't actually go do it, it's not going to get done. And so that same mindset has to be applied to making change, to causing change, to making things happen. You can't just say it. Oh, that gutter needs to be fixed.
Right, fairy dust.
And then expect the gutter to be fixed. There are other steps that come into it that you have to actively go and pursue. And so we not just we, but everyone, we have to keep that in mind, even as we bring awareness to things that, bringing awareness isn't always enough. There are a lot of things happening behind the scenes that we don't know about. There are a lot of people working within legislation to try to make some differences, and there are a lot of legislations being shut down, by the very government that claims to represent us. And so, that leads me back to this weekend, Juneteenth, and the colonization of Juneteenth as they make it a national holiday. It concerns me in a sense. I'm content. I'm happy that it's a holiday, but I'm concerned that they feel like it's enough. And right. Hey, we're gonna bring awareness to this by saying, hey, we let you guys know you're free a long time ago. So all that stuff that happened last year it's all a wash. We're even now. Like, no, that's not how it works. We still need to keep working. We need to keep moving. We need to, we can celebrate Juneteenth the way that we have already, and then they can get their day off as well. And then we need to keep moving forward and put into work more so than the time.
Yeah. Well, this is such a provocative subject that. I don't know, we could go on for the rest of the evening and pour some wine or pour some beer, pour whatever, and just sit back and reiterate. But I think it's important that we look beyond the fact that, Juneteenth is a holiday, to say Juneteenth is declared a national holiday because, and we have to have that because. Mm-hmm. And how that is going to grow and evolve over time. We were listening to Robin and Alison earlier as part of theirs, and we were laughing about the fact that, next year Target and Walmart are going to be selling dashikis, right? Just like they sell the American T-shirts for, July 4th. Now we're going to have, they'll try to monetize, commercialize, and neutralize the impact of really Juneteenth and the Emancipation Proclamation. So, it's up to us, people like us, to sort of be the ambassadors for our own truth, and hope that other people become part of the liberation from the mythologies that have surrounded us for so many years. I didn't ask if anybody online had a question for anybody. Okay.
And I think that is something that I'm appreciative of Ntare for, especially integrating me into the spoken word community, because even when it comes to poetry, it's an opportunity, especially when you put it in print, to leave your story in your own words at a piece of history. And being able to do something like that, and even if it's one of those things where you set it and forget it and it ends up in a library somewhere, it's there.
Yeah.
And, as like poets have no reason to lie. Textbooks do, but poets don't. And so, as you get a feel for, being able to tell your story and leave a piece of yourself in your own words, because we've all seen some pretty terrible biopics. And so when you have your own, narrative, your own story in your own words, then, that's a piece of you that you can leave behind that someone else can look back and say, okay, so this is how at least this person felt, and then if you get a collective of other writings and everything, then they can figure out how more people felt. So this is why I always encourage you at home, Right. Even if it's not poetry, or if it's a narrative, if it's just a journal, write how you feel, write what you think. Leave it out, leave it somewhere, so that even if you keep it for yourself, and then your family finds it years, decades later, they can understand you, they can get a feel for who you were, what you thought about what was going on, and eventually, if we bring it all together, you can find out how over our community feels about something as well. So, Dr. King wrote. We just performed his words over 60 years later. So,
Yes,
you never
yes,
quite know
yes,
how far
yes,
it goes.
yes.
I just want to say that I can't take credit. I can't take full credit for that though. I actually got that from Lorna Hill.
Mm.
Uh, when,
Yes.
you know, he and I used to do a number of performances and workshops together. Uh, Sometimes when I had the first group for the voices, and she was like my fill in person, like if during the workday and nobody was available, Lorna and I would go out and do a performance together, which was always incredible. But when people started asking, how do you, students would ask, how do you write and what makes you write and things like that. And Lorna would tell them, I can't tell your story. You have to
Yes.
tell your story. And so, and you're going to tell your story accurately to the best of your ability, and you're going to recognize it. Because Lorna said, if I tell your story, you may not recognize it.
Mm-hmm.
And so I pretty much just embodied that teaching that she used to give other students, and I started teaching it to anybody who I was working with. You know, like, like tell your story. How are you going to tell your story? But I don't want to sit here and act like I was just a smart person who came up with that. I got that from Lorna.
But it passed down, and that's what's important. That's the thing. It passed from one
Which
to
is
the
coming up
other.
on her birthday.
Yes, we
Mm-hmm.
are coming
Yeah,
up on her
yeah.
birthday. Yes, yes. And I have to say, I'll give Lorna all the credit in the world for me pursuing my projects and passions the way that I am because um, I relied on her heavily for a lot of different reasons. And her advice to me, because I say, girl, I am not no director, okay? I see things and I know how they want to go and yada yada. And that was her response was, well, um, do you know what you want to do? I would say, oh, sure. Can you see what you want? I would say, oh, sure. She said, well, then get some people to help you. I said, oh, okay. And then I would say, are you going to help me? She said, okay, sure, sis. But putting it in a compact, very succinct way is exactly how I do things. I see it, I know what I want, and I reach out. And I've been very fortunate that there have been good people who have been able to come together and make it happen. So, Lorna lives.
Mm-hmm.
Lorna lives on. We're going to wind down. I want to say, Ntare, thank you for making the time today. It's good to see you. We'll
Yeah,
hopefully
yeah.
we'll see you on the eastern seaboard at some point because I know you're too hot down there. And
Were
thank
there
you.
any classes?
Yes.
Say it one time.
I didn't hear him in my. I can't. I lost
Were
him.
there any questions that came online? That's interesting to know.
No, it was just more people
If anybody had any thoughts or
they were
opinions.
saying congratulations and stuff.
Oh,
No, we just got a lot of
If
congratulations
not,
and praise.
yeah.
oh, okay.
All right, so I'll tell people that this is going to be going live again tomorrow. So please tune in. The Spirit of African Dance in America will start at 1:30, and Literature of Birmingham Jail will start at 3:30. Ntare will be back to join us. Brandon is welcome. I think Mary Craig, the songstress and storyteller, is going to be here because we'll talk about the importance of freedom songs to the civil rights movement. Dr. King was really adamant saying that the music and the freedom songs were the glue to the movement.
Mm-hmm.
So thank you, Express Entertainment. That's where we are. If you need a video, call them up and ask them to make it for you. You do have to pay for it, though, I want to say.
Yeah, you gotta pay. And you gotta make sure that what good is an idea if it's not expressed to be dealt with, right?
Yeah.
So think about it.